stories, they tell us who we are. About me, my friends, my family, those we love and love no more. Live our lives as stories, not always knowing why, but the world keeps turning round again. Lives and stories just go by.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the Foundation for Learning and Literacy, it is my privilege and pleasure to introduce the very first of 14 different presentations over the next 6 months under the umbrella We All Like a Good Story. Before we start today, I would like to pay our respects to our original storytellers, our First Nations Australians, and to acknowledge that they place story at the centre of their doing, knowing, being and becoming. And we have much to learn from the power and pleasure of story. I'm very privileged to be able to introduce our two presenters today, Dr. Mellie Green and Christine Topfer. Both of them are passionate about the pleasure and the power of literature in our lives and in our literacy learning. Over to Mellie.
Thanks, Robin. Hi, friends. I'm Dr. Mellie Green. Welcome to my presentation on promoting a reading for enjoyment pedagogy. I too acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we meet, work and study. In this presentation, I draw on John Dewey's 1934 and 1897 work to share my doctoral research and offer a reading for enjoyment pedagogic creed. I am a teacher who reads and a reader who teaches. I have been a primary school teacher for 27 years, a teacher librarian for 20, a school curriculum leader for 5, and more recently, a lecturer in literacy. Since very early career involvement in a 1997 literacy initiative, I have been an advocate for children's reading, specifically the educative value of reading enjoyment. The burgeoning problem of read-aside provoked my PhD study. In my PhD study, I explored teachers' interpretation and enactment of the English curriculum demand to engage students in reading for enjoyment in the local Australian context. I sought to explore the thoughts and experiences of classroom teachers working under the intense pressures of what Fullan might describe as the wrong drivers of education reform. That is, competition and accountability, which use test results to reward or punish teachers and schools. Narrative inquiry was purposefully chosen as a collaborative and reflective way of investigating teachers' lived experience. The narrative inquiry methodological approach supported my overall aim to achieve an invitational and inspirational research project, which was focused on and aimed at increasing and improving student engagement in reading for enjoyment. I was fortunate to recruit 4 fabulous teachers, Amy, Belinda, Connie and Denise. Each of these wonderful women opened their doors and welcomed me in to explore the quintessence of their teaching tactics and techniques. They bravely brought to light the personal and professional underpinnings of their practice, and they did so despite the demands of an overwhelming workload. Their provocation lay in their profound beliefs in the love of learning of and from high-quality children's literature. Our research work together focused on a statement that appears in every year-level description in the Australian curriculum from prep to year 10. Students engage with a variety of texts for enjoyment. This statement aligns with the aims of the Australian Curriculum English, of which there are 4. If we look at the first, it states that students learn to purposefully and proficiently read. Louise Rosenblatt identified 2 key purposes for reading. The first is efferent, with attention focused on information to be carried away. The second is aesthetic, with attention focused on the inward stirring of personal feelings, ideas, and attitudes. If we look at the third aim of the Australian Curriculum English, it states that students develop interest and skills in examining the aesthetic aspects of texts and develop an informed appreciation of literature. This is further enhanced in the fourth aim, which states students appreciate and enjoy the richness and power of the English language to evoke feelings and ideas. We might argue then that over half of the aims of the Australian Curriculum English target student engagement in a variety of texts for aesthetic purpose. They reiterate the Alice Springs and Parntway Education Declaration that states on page 3, education plays a vital role in promoting the intellectual, physical, social, emotional, moral, spiritual, and aesthetic development of students. What pleasantly surprised me in my study was the teachers' vast variance in their reading for enjoyment pedagogic approaches. More on these will follow in my PhD publications. What concerned me most was their struggle in articulating their student engagement in literature for enjoyment, for aesthetic purpose and development. We can see in this data poem created from our research discussion on the matter, the teachers grappled. I didn't know that, but then the question is, does the curriculum itself lead to that? And what is aesthetic development? Are we so focused on the pencil and the rigours of academic learning that we might be letting the aesthetics pass us by? That's my feeling. We're letting that slide. I've never heard that before. The aesthetic development thing. You can interpret that in so many different ways. Now I have to think about that. Well, aesthetics, Isn't it the feeling you get from your visual surrounds? Is that what we're talking about? Not that I've ever heard. I suppose it's the kids feeling good about themselves, being able to have empathy for others. I think that's part of the whole deal. Can you ask me the question again? To make sense of the teacher's amazing work, I used John Dewey's comprehensive seminal masterpiece of Theory on Aesthetic Experience. In this, he explains the significance of social and temporal dimensions of human experience. An aesthetic experience is understood as a contextualized transaction in which a person is potentially, potently transformed and developed. Contemporary professor of aesthetics, Benson Nane, writes about aesthetics as one of the most important aspects of our life. It comprises our key cares and concerns. Yet, we have an inherent problem articulating this. If we look to the Australian Curriculum English strand that describes what students do in response to engagement in literature, we find the general, perhaps generic verbs of respond, discuss, identify, describe, present, where we might hope to find experience, enjoy, explore, engage, encounter, perceive, feel. As a result of my study, to contribute to knowledge on the educative value of a reading for enjoyment pedagogy, I address this apparent lack of meta-language around stimulating a love of literature and reading. I presented an ABC of terms related to children's reading enjoyment. They form a proclamation of principles that promote young learners' prerogative to experience the beauty of books and potent appreciation of literary texts. I would now like to share a little of this work I call our Reading for Enjoyment Pedagogic Creed. I wonder if you know what the letters might spell and what spell the letters may cast. Resonant reverberations. We believe in children's right to read and in teachers' repute as reading role models. We believe in readying children's lines of reading response through appreciative reflections on the rhythms, resistances, resonances, and reverberations experienced in reading. Reading can reorient assumptions and rectify misconceptions. Reciprocity in book talk strengthens relationships and raises reading identities. Emotional evocations. We believe in the enactment of a reading for enjoyment pedagogy, which emphasizes an emotionalized and embodied experience of reading. We believe that such engagement should evoke and excite energies, which expand and enhance empathy, adducing expressions of enduring effects. Essentially, educators must ensure the most efficacious environment and enlivening events for enjoyable reading experiences. Aesthetic appreciation. We believe engagement in reading for enjoyment contributes powerfully to children's aesthetic development. A teacher's role is to advocate for and absorb students in appealing reading, in which affect is aroused through activities of anticipation, abstraction, adjustment, and above all, aesthetic appreciation. This able and active advancement of reading is anchored into an abiding attitude. Delightful doing. We believe in the dynamic demands of literature, in its drama, disruption, and delights. We believe that an aesthetic approach to reading finds delight in discord, desire in discovery, and discernment in narrative developments. The direct sense of appeal of reading enjoyment in the definitive degree contributes to deepened understandings. Through book discussions, we determine preferential differences and develop durable reading dispositions. Interpenetrative imaginings. We believe in inspiring children's reading impulsions, interests, and identities. We believe in illuminating the impressions imbued, the insights imported, ideas and ideals induced. We invite the inner intensities of interpenetrative interactions with texts. Importantly, through inquisitive reading, we improve children's immediate and interminable involvement in imaginative thinking. Novel needs. We believe in nurturing the intimate nature of reading engagement. We believe in the human need for narrative. For each child, we notice the nuanced and new notions netted from a novel well read. Great gateways. We believe in reading for enjoyment, for generative growth and gratification. The gains of reading for enjoyment are indeed great. When teachers give the gift of a gripping read aloud, students glean a glorious insight into the guise of good readers and gravitate gladly to good books. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Mellie. You've certainly given us a lot to think about in terms of why reading can give us so much pleasure. And now we're going to listen to Chris Topfer, who's going to share with us some of the rich literacy lessons that literature, quality literature, can enable. Chris will be well known to many of you. She has been a primary teacher in Tasmania for many years. She's also been an assistant principal and a curriculum lead. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today, Chris.
Today I'm going to be talking about the power and pleasure of using rich texts in our classrooms. I'll just share my screen and I'm going to share with you some texts that I've used in the classroom and give you some ideas of how we might build a love of literature and a love of reading in this process. So quality literature can be a powerful tool in literacy teaching. There's much research to confirm that reading aloud to students every day is an essential instructional practice. And when we read aloud, we must bring to the fore a pedagogy that builds children's desire to gain meaning, expands vocabulary, develops their understanding of how language works, and also which nourishes a love of reading. To be powerful, read alouds require us to spend time thoughtfully selecting a wide variety of texts that are worthy of revisiting, relevant messages, language structures and features, and that will inspire and motivate our learners. These texts will be rich with learning opportunities. Consider collecting sets of texts that are thematically or conceptually related and that offer opportunities to learn what children could not yet experience independently. On the screen, you'll see a selection of books that I've grouped together. They could be grouped for various themes, but they all have a connection to an overarching idea, the sea, and how we use it, what lives there, and the impact humans have on the sea. A powerful read aloud session, though, will have planned stopping points. We need to read the text before we read it to the students because we need to enable higher order discussion between our students. In the delightful book Beside the Sea by Kerry Day, a grandmother and child eagerly await some special visitors at the seaside. Day writes, watching, waiting, gently, protecting under the sun. Is it time? This is the perfect moment to plan a stopping point where children turn and talk. They're thinking about, what are they waiting for? Why do they have to wait? The students will be predicting and justifying their opinion about what is about to happen. Teaching a routine, such as turn and talk, gives all students an opportunity to share their thinking and hear the thinking of others. And importantly, students are learning the strategic action that effective readers engage in. Duke and Cartwright remind us that good readers are active, strategic, and engaged, and these executive skills can and should be taught to our young learners. This book also provides further opportunities to engage our children in thoughtful discussion, as the story soon presents a need for a rescue when some lost baby turtles are in danger. Everyone is needed to save the day, as these marine turtle hatchlings, confused by light pollution, lose their way to the sea. Evidence indicates that higher order discussion among children and teachers before, during, and after reading is an essential instructional practice when sharing rich texts. We purposely plan stopping points for discussion by placing sticky notes with planned questions in the book at points where you might stop the read aloud so students can share their thinking, first in pairs and later in other collaborative ways. Because rich texts build background knowledge and support vocabulary development in preparation for reading and writing success. So you might like to reflect on who is doing the most thinking and the most talking in your classroom, and how might you set up opportunities for interactions with students around texts. Now, you might partner the Beside the Sea read aloud with a timeless classic by Mellie, The Smallest Turtle, the story of a baby turtle that makes a perilous journey to the sea. In this book, a tiny turtle is the last of his brothers and sisters to hatch, and so he must leave the nest and make the dangerous journey down to the sea all by himself. Once again, planned stopping points for discussion abound, with opportunities for discussion and learning about the sea, the plight of sea turtles, environmental issues, and the importance of a family as part of a wider learning unit you might have in your classroom. Use the Think Aloud strategy to model active reading processes. Talk about what might happen to the smallest turtle and ask your students, what made you think that? Rich texts can and should be revisited to learn more about the aspects of our language, in particular, the craft of writing. After all, these are published authors who have spent a long time crafting these words. For example, Mellie opens The Smallest Sea Turtle story with a sentence beginning with two circumstances of place: deep in a safe dark hole under the sand. This is suggesting the significance of this location to the unfolding story. And the very best way to write well is to notice the models of what great writers do. So by analysing texts in this way, we look at how authors construct sentences to portray their ideas, and we can show our students how language works by looking at it doing its work in its natural habitat, exemplary writing. By intentionally noticing and naming what we notice in rich texts, the text becomes a model or a mentor and supports understanding about the ways in which we can play with language to achieve our intentions. So these rich texts are powerful in what they offer in this reading and writing connection. And Ralph Fletcher reminds us that writing in the classroom can only be as good as the literature and the writing that supports and surrounds and buoys it up. Mentor text gives students horizons, something to shoot for. And authors become co-teachers and provide a necessary scaffold for learners who have not heard a lot of English spoken. So The Beach Wombat by Susanna Chambers is another text set aside beside the sea. The beach is a fascinating place for a little wombat this time, well, until it rains. This is another story about a journey beside the sea. Purposeful planning for revisiting texts such as this will include reinforcing and practicing vocabulary and orthography, including phonology and morphology. So while we might have planning for rich discussions, we also need to notice these text features. In this text, I'd plan to notice and enjoy onomatopoeia. Splish, splosh, splash. Have the children say the words a few times and discuss how they sound like the water. This is a great example of medial vowel substitution. Notice the SPL initial consonant cluster and the final digraph SH. I would add these words to any previous investigation about their spelling features. So planned stopping points for this book would also include time to discuss the meaning of phrases such as sand in a blur and the implied idea that has become windy. These powerful and pleasurable read-alouds should involve instructional strategies that describe and model comprehension strategies. This particular book provides an example of how prior knowledge impacts a student's ability to infer. That is, if you've never been to the beach on a windy day, you might not understand what sand in a blur actually means. Therefore, we need time for discussion around these ideas. But understanding that words have structure and a history assists students to expand their vocabulary. That's such an important part of our teaching. Kirby and Bowers proposed that morphology offers an agent for better integration of the mental representations of words by facilitating clues to meaning from both orthography and phonology. Key understandings in rich texts offer words for exploration. These texts could lead to an exploration about the word sea, beginning with a discussion about, what is sea? What does it mean? What isn't it? Students would work together to gather any related words that share that same base element. And by revisiting these read-aloud texts, they'll soon identify words such as seashell, seagull, seashore. And these words will provide an opportunity for you to revisit students' understanding of compounds. That is, a word may have more than one base element that contributes to the meaning of the word. And words such as seashell, seaside, seashore form a meaning family, and we refer to this as a morphological word family. Further reading might introduce words such as seahorse and sea dog, and you can see a couple of other texts on the screen there. Children learn how words that have a connection in meaning will likely have a connection in spelling. And when words are learned through an understanding of word structure, rather than in isolated lists, vocabulary is broadened and many words can be learned by studying one base element. Rich texts can provide a word bank of words to use when learning grapheme-phoneme correspondences. These collections of text provide an opportunity to introduce or revisit the grapheme choices representing the long E phoneme. Sea and beach provide examples of the EA grapheme representing long E in the final and the medial position. And reading other rich texts will offer further words for examination. Noticing and naming the circumstances of when to use a particular grapheme will be particularly helpful. Children will notice that double E grapheme always represents E, but the EA grapheme is flexible and can represent short E in the same morphological family, such as clean to cleanse and mean to meant. So reading aloud or shared reading of rich text provides opportunities for students to practice using and noticing grapheme-phoneme relationships they have been taught. And I couldn't leave this collection of books without offering the opportunity to explore the comparative and superlative suffixes of ER and EST. Not only will this build vocabulary, but students' ability to spell many words. Researchers suggest that not only do we need to introduce word meanings to children during reading and content area instruction, using child-friendly explanations and providing opportunities for children to pronounce the new words, but that we also must show students the spelling of the new words and how they're connected. So purposeful planning increases the power and the pleasure gained from sharing rich literature every day in every classroom.
Thank you so much, Chris. You've given us so much to think about and so many practical ideas. We hope that you'll join all of the presentations over the next 6 months. They'll all be recorded so that you can join at your leisure. And we hope that coming together in this way will help all of us remember the purpose, the power, and the pleasure of good stories, rich literature in our lives and in our learning. All the very best to you all.
All our lives are stories, they tell us who we are. But me, my friends, my family, those we love and love no more. Live our lives as stories, not all